Picture this. You finally get to that pristine, picturesque weekend rental. You punch in the keypad code, hear that satisfying click of the lock, and you just assume you've got absolute privacy. You're keeping the world out. But what if you're actually locking yourself in with something else? It's a pretty chilling thought, right? What if the quiet little sanctuary you just paid for is, well, actually a trap? Welcome to The Explainer. I am so incredibly pumped you're here with us today. We are diving straight into the source material behind 3 deeply disturbing, very real rental horror stories. We're going to break down 3 distinct archetypes of these rental nightmares, really analyzing how a simple, relaxing weekend getaway can just rapidly devolve into a total psychological and physical nightmare. By laying out the facts and walking through the timelines together, we're going to anatomize exactly what makes these specific situations so utterly terrifying. All right, let's jump right into our first archetype, Tale 1, the insider threat. Okay, let's dive into this one because this case turns the entire concept of a rental completely upside down. Why? Because our victim here wasn't actually the guest. He was the host. He owned this modest little beach house in South Carolina, and wanting to pocket the cleaning fee for himself, he decided to drive down right after his latest guest, a guy named Ramon, had supposedly checked out. Let's look at this timeline because you really have to feel how exhausted this guy was. He starts this brutal 16-hour straight shot drive down the coast super early in the morning. By the time he finally unlocks his front door at 10 p.m., he is just completely wiped out. He doesn't inspect the house, doesn't check the rooms. He just unlocks his private, off-limits master bedroom, collapses into bed without even brushing his teeth, and passes out. But just an hour and a half later, at 11:30 p.m., he wakes up in pitch black darkness. He's completely disoriented, but his instincts are screaming. He knows for a fact that something inside the house just woke him up. He grabs his phone, flicks on the lamp, and starts looking around. The living room, spotless. No empty cans, no moved pillows. The guest beds look completely untouched. Just on a whim, he opens his phone app to check the front porch camera's motion history, and what he finds gives him instant chills. Exactly 3 days earlier, the camera captured a man entering the house using the code log. Now, Ramon had claimed to be traveling with his fiancée, but the video showed just a single man walking in. And crucially, and this is the terrifying part, scrolling through the entire video history, there was absolutely zero footage of anyone ever leaving. The host's heart absolutely drops. He messages Ramon on the app asking, "Hey, did you check out?" No response, so he begins this frantic, terrifying search of his own house. Step 1, he creeps into the first guest bedroom, yanking open the empty closets like he's ripping off a Band-Aid. Nothing. Step 2, he moves to the second guest room, checking under those untouched twin beds and opening the final closet, also empty. He sits on the edge of the bed for just a second to catch his breath, and then, step 3, he hears the master bedroom door, the exact room he had just been sleeping in, click, shut, deliberately, quietly. He knew instantly, no way was that just a draft. He steps out into the living room and just stares at that closed master bedroom door. With a shaking voice, he calls out, "Ramon, are you still in here?" Dead silence. He actually gets down on all fours to look through the little gap at the bottom of the door, and literally falls backwards in horror. He sees 2 feet standing just a couple of feet behind the door. Panicking, he runs to the kitchen to grab the biggest carving knife from the wooden block to defend himself, but the slot is empty. The knife is already gone. With no other options, he bolts out of his own house and calls 911. Now, you're going to want to scream at this next part, because the unresolved aftermath is absolutely infuriating. When the police finally arrive and clear the house, Ramon is just casually sitting in the living room. And guess what? That carving knife is conveniently right back in the kitchen block. Ramon puts on this thick Portuguese accent, acting completely innocent, claiming he just got confused and thought he needed to stay one more night. And amazingly, after just 30 minutes of talking to him, the police let him go. I mean, they literally tell the host to just work it out with the rental app. The host gets zero compensation for the squatter, and the app, they just ban Ramon's account. That's it. The insider threat just vanishes into the night, leaving the host with the horrifying reality that a stranger was likely standing in the dark, watching him sleep, holding a carving knife. Which leads us right into our second archetype, Tale 2, the remote trap. Now, what's really interesting about this one is how the psychological tension just builds and builds. This story centers around a highly stressed 26-year-old guy who desperately needed a peaceful fall foliage retreat, so he books a cabin in rural Virginia. But look at these escalating red flags before the sun even fully sets. First, he drives 2.5 hours down an incredibly isolated gravel road. Later, on his way back from a short drive, he sees two unsmiling locals walking down the road who stop dead in their tracks, just to stare at him. Creepy, right? Then, while reading by the fire, he steps outside and literally spots two men actively running into the woods near the property entrance. And by the time he gets back from a quick grocery run to the nearest town 20 minutes away, the entire area has plunged into complete pitch black darkness. Zero streetlights, zero neighbors. Super paranoid at this point, the renter messages the cabin host about the men he saw running into the woods. Look at this contrast here. The host is incredibly dismissive, texting back that it's nothing to be alarmed about and probably just teens in the area. Yeah, right. Contrast that assurance with the terrifying reality. Shortly after he locks himself inside and sits by the fireplace, the power to the entire house suddenly cuts out completely. Pitch black. He messages the host again, and the host tells him to go outside in the dark and check a breaker box by a telephone pole. The renter, entirely freaked out, absolutely refuses to step out into those dark woods. And honestly, thank God he didn't. As he's sitting there paralyzed, illuminated only by the fading glow of the fireplace, he hears a distinct creak in the floorboard coming from the darkest corner of the room. He slowly looks over. There, standing by the bathroom door, is a tall, looming figure. And then, a soft, deep, incredibly disturbing voice speaks from the shadows, telling the renter to remain completely calm and to hand over absolutely everything he has. The renter has no choice. He empties his wallet, hands over his backpack, and is ordered to stay in the kitchen while the intruder slips out into the night. Now, if we just look at the numbers here on paper, the practical loss is relatively minor, right? A $400 laptop and about $100 in cash. But the true horror, the thing that really sticks with you, is the lingering suspicion. The doors were locked, the host refused to issue a refund, and was strangely, almost suspiciously, dismissive the whole time. How did that intruder actually get inside? The victim is still haunted by the very real possibility that the host himself orchestrated this entire remote trap. Let's move on and see how this isolation theme builds into our final archetype. Tale 3, the Unseen Watcher. This one taps into that primal, deeply ingrained fear of the Geep Woods. A group of recent high school grads rent this picturesque cabin to celebrate up in the White Mountains National Forest Preserve. We really have to establish this environment to understand the scare. This is a sprawling, wildly isolated wilderness. The source material emphasizes that out here, completely devoid of cars or planes overhead, you experience what they call true silence. It's an emptiness so deep it literally rings in your ears. But juxtaposed right against this beautiful natural setting is this incredibly creepy, shambling old shed right next to the rental house. It's got dirt-caked windows, a dirt floor, and this lingering, totally unexplained smell of stale cigarette smoke. The real terror unfolds on their second night, while they're all sitting around a campfire. Let's break down exactly how this peaceful night completely shatters through these escalating sensory inputs. First, that ringing true silence is broken by heavy, crunching footsteps coming from the dark tree line, and they are moving fast, heading directly toward the group. Second, out of nowhere, there is a blinding, sudden flash of green light that illuminates the entire backyard for just a split second. And third, immediately following that flash, a deafening, blood-curdling cry rings out from the woods. It's a scream so loud and bizarre, they initially mistake it for an emergency siren. As you can imagine, absolute chaos erupts. One of the girls, Stephanie, just screams and bolts toward the house. The narrator actually knocks over one of his friends in the blind scramble to get away. Rob, one of the other guys, rushes to the back door to cover their retreat with a can of bear spray, while the narrator pulls out a Bowie knife. Once they are safely locked inside, panting and terrified, they demand to know what Stephanie saw during that green flash. Her description is pure nightmare fuel. She didn't see an animal, she saw a man, hunched over, wearing some kind of dark cloak or heavy blanket over himself, just lurking right on the edge of their firelight. They call 911, and here comes the gaslighting again. Look at this comparison. You have the dismissive police explanation. An officer shows up, shines a flashlight around the yard for a minute, finds nothing, and literally tries to claim the green flash was just lightning hitting a transformer, and the scream, oh, that was probably just a Fisher cat. But contrast that weak theory with the visceral, unforgettable reality of the guest's experience. They know exactly what they saw. A hunched, cloaked man actively stalking them from the tree line. The sheer, overwhelming paranoia of being watched by this unseen entity forces the entire group to pack up and flee at first light the very next morning, leaving the true nature of their watcher a complete mystery. So, pulling this all together, Section 4, the core threat, what lurks in the woods. So the crucial point here is, when we extract the core data from these 3 separate incidents, a very distinct, very unsettling pattern of vulnerability emerges. Whether it's an insider threat hiding in your own bedroom, a remote trap leveraging your isolation against you, or an unseen watcher silently stalking you from the shadows. The fundamental nature of a short-term rental requires you to drop your guard in a space that is ultimately controlled by a total stranger. These true stories completely alter how we view those cozy, perfectly lit pictures on a booking app, don't they? They force us to ask a terrifying final question that I want to leave you with today. When you excitedly book your next scenic retreat and punch in that entry code, who or what might already have the keys? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep analyzing, stay curious, and always check the closets.